Hello and welcome to the pod. I'm Nathan Fink.
I'm Jasmine Torres Allen, and this is New Hampshire Family Now,
a show about building family in the Granite State. Today in the show, Jasmine and I discuss Black History Month and the difference between being and seeming. And later, author, thought leader, and president of the Manchester branch of the NAACP, James McKim, helps us build toward a better, more inclusive future. New Hampshire Family Now is brought to you by the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. Since 1962, the Charitable Foundation has worked hand in hand with generous and visionary citizens to maximize the power of giving and support, collaborate, and lead innovative initiatives. Initiatives like New Hampshire Tomorrow, which is focused on making sure children and families have access to education, healthcare, and career pathways to ensure every family member thrives. To learn more about New Hampshire Charitable Foundation and all their initiatives, go to www.nhcf.org. This podcast was also brought to you by Family Support New Hampshire. Family Support New Hampshire is NH's coalition of family resource centers and family strengthening programs that exist to ensure Granite State families have access to resources so both caregivers and children can succeed, because supported families are strong families. To find a family resource center near you, visit www.fsnh.org. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Nathan Fink.
And I'm Jasmine.
We have a great show for you today, including an interview with author, advocate, and current president of the NAACP in Manchester, James McKim. But first, Jasmine Torres Allen turns 30.
Oh my gosh!
I was so surprised I almost called the FCC to file an age complaint.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Because, well, and my wife says this every time she listens to you. She's like, Jasmine's 30. That's not fair.
What do you mean that's not fair?
Because you seem so put together.
Oh, I wish that were true.
Well, okay, so in that vein then, so for me, because, I get maybe the best of you.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So who is the Jasmine that might be behind the scenes then?
Do you know, organized mess?
Yeah.
I just know where all my little piles and what they are for. And so it freaks people out all the time when they see my little piles of organized chaos.
So your desk, for example?
Oh, my desk. Yeah, that's...
Yeah, I don't... even this idea, though, of being and seeming, James and I get into it quite a bit.
I actually had a conversation with someone about being a community figure and then having to be a regular person day to day, and the balance between those two things, because people have an image of you as a community leader, and then they don't see the other side of you, which is the human part of you being a struggling, caregiver or a full-time working, individual who's trying to juggle family and work life and also have friends and,
right.
and walking that fine line of how people see you and how you see yourself. And sometimes those lines get really blurry because you have to wear multiple hats, I feel like.
This is an unfair question, but which part's the good part? Seriously, because this idea of kind of, you just laid out, there's this public me as well. There's this public me and there's this really private me. And I think I'm convinced the private me is the good part.
Oh, for sure. I am the same exact way. And I say that about people. I'm like, if you really know me, you'd actually know that I'm actually kind of shy.
Right.
Yeah. And so, but you wouldn't know me when I'm out in community and I'm out with people, because when I'm out in community, I feel supercharged and I'm ready and I love talking to people, but the private me is actually really shy and I really enjoy that part, and I really enjoy my alone time sometimes.
That's so funny. My life goal forever was to make people laugh for 30 seconds or less and then never look at me again.
That's a really weird goal, but okay.
Well, because think about it, because that was I made them laugh, and then the moment that I realized that they're looking at me, it feels like they want more from me, and I'm like, that's all I got.
That's it. Exactly.
But, I do want to lean into this difference, though, between being and seeming, especially because it's Black History Month, because I've had this growing unease it feels like we're trying to seem a certain way.
Right.
Especially in, February, I'm getting the sense that we turn to our Black community and we say, okay, go.
Right.
Your time.
It's your time. Yeah.
Go.
And a lot of the times it can be very performative, right?
Right.
And sometimes I even say, like, in my own professional life, that's seeming and seeing, and this is something some communities talk about is the code switching, even when we're talking about professionalism, right? The code switching between maybe corporate speak and then there's like the way you speak to your community, and there's a language coded within that. And so sometimes, you want to be seen in your professional life just the way you're seen in your community, but sometimes those don't mix. And, then you find yourself code switching, and it can be used as a survival tool.
I think this growing unease is coming with the fact that, I'm trying to raise children and I desperately want them to be certain things. You know what I mean? I want them to be just. I want them to have a moral compass. I want them to be equitable. I want them to have agency. I want them to be certain things. And so there's this hesitation in me when I start to see this performative seeming.
Right.
And so I'm looking for ways to better and more authentically celebrate in a way that empowers the progression of the conversation that we desperately need to change in our community.
Absolutely. Yeah.
know?
And I think that really starts with centering, Black and brown people and having them lead and guide the things that they want to do and what they feel like can serve the community better on educating people. And sometimes organizations get it right and some organizations get it wrong. And I think that the key is really having Black and brown people lead the conversation and be centered at the conversation and bringing them into these moments. And that's if they want to, because they don't owe anybody anything. Right. You know what I mean? Like that. And I think that's the other part too that we have to understand, that it's on us to look for those opportunities in community and be in community when those events or those things are happening, and try to decipher what's healthier for our kids to be exposed to. But I really truly believe that it's really about centering Black and brown people, in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And when you're talking to your kids, it's really having that honest conversation.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because it's like, all right, so when are we seeking those voices? We're seeking those voices when those voices are being sought at a certain time.
Exactly.
That's not what we're talking about.
And that's how like, I can always tell from an organization that can walk the walk because they're doing it all year long.
All year.
They're centering diverse voices all year long in different ways, in ways that serve the community and not just puts a Band-Aid over things. Right. You know what I mean? It's just understanding that it's not just 1 month. And of course, it's the shortest month of the year. Yeah. So, it's all year long that you're doing things, not just in February, you're doing things all year long.
These aren't just voices that we're asking for at a specific time of the year. These are the voices of the community.
Right.
And this is part of every conversation we have about anything.
Exactly.
It's not separate. It is the conversation.
This is everyday life. These are people in your community. And when you are in community, you are around these individuals. And so it becomes a part of your everyday life and not just for 1 month.
Now, does PBS have any materials or support for parents?
Absolutely. So we have this new show called Lila in the Loop, and she and her family own a diner, but this is focused in on a Black family in Chicago, actually. And they serve all kinds of different families, but the show is focused in on Black STEM educators. And so if you want to learn a little bit more about Lila and the Loop, you can go to nhpbs.org/education.
And when we come back, James McKim joins us. Don't go anywhere. Today's episode was brought to you by Upreach Therapeutic Equestrian Center. Located in Goffstown, New Hampshire, Upreach partners with the power of horse to create strong children, strong families, and strong communities. To learn more about Upreach Therapeutic Equestrian Center and its many inspirational programs, visit upreachtec.org. That's upreachtec.org. Today's show was also brought to you by Burgoo Media, a full-service media company dedicated to helping nonprofits realize impact stories for print, video, social, and legacy media, and more. Both budget-conscious and grant-friendly, Ergo Media helps your organization celebrate the humans in human services. Learn more at ergomedia.com. Hey, it's Nathan, co-host of New Hampshire Family Now. I wanted to take a quick break from the show because it occurred to me the other day that I've never asked you to subscribe to this podcast. Subscribing is free, and when you do it, it helps our placement algorithms, making it that much easier for caregivers across New Hampshire to find valuable information and strategies for their families. Also, you'll be alerted when a new episode drops. And if you like the show, leaving a review helps us that much more. So go to wherever you get your podcast, type in New Hampshire Family Now, and as the kids say, smash that subscribe button. I say click it, because if you smash it, then you're going to need a new one. Thank you, and enjoy today's podcast. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today on the show, I'm thrilled to be joined by thought leader, speaker, author James McKim, who has ignited positive community change for over 30 years through board and committee work, serving as the current president of Manchester branch of the NAACP, and who, if I'm not mistaken, seems to have survived 2 children of his own.
Have indeed. Have indeed.
You do seem here. You do seem present, but I want to talk about that idea of seeming and being.
Yeah, seeming and being, that difference, that fine line.
So what does that do to your philosophical background?
Well, to my philosophical background, I'm thinking a number of things. What immediately sprung to mind is that I just did a workshop on culture in the workplace. And it turns out there are 9 different components of culture. And one of them is values. What do you value? And there are actually 9 different types of values that different cultures have. And one of them is being versus doing. And that's what sprung to my mind, the being versus seeming. The notion that you can appear one way, but inside you're another.
And, this is a larger conversation that I think we started offline when I approached you about being on this podcast.
Yes, we did.
Yes. And it was so fascinating because we were talking about people as these really large intersection points of, your own personal history, your current roles, responsibilities, for the fact that you were community members and users of a system that have both tremendous potential and tremendous prejudices. And when I said that, you answered it with this long list of ologies. Can you take me back there? Because I want to know what you meant by that list.
So this is based on work that was really started by Marilyn Loden in 1991 when she was at Johns Hopkins Institute. And she said, we really want to think about our personalities. And our personalities are made up of various, she used the term characteristics, and she placed them on what she called the diversity wheel. So there are these internal personality characteristics, which have to do with the core of who we are. What's our race, our age, our gender, our physical ability. And then there are these external characteristics, which have to do with how we interact with others. So where we are geographically, where we live. So we're New Hampshireites, and that's part of our personalities. What's our work experience? What's our religion, our educational background? How do we normally dress? So it's our appearance, that's seeming again, right? So those are all parts of our personalities as well and make up who we are. And that does ologies, if you will.
Right.
And then there are these organizational characteristics, how we interact and are seen in an organization. So what function do we perform? Are we marketing? Are we sales? Are we admin? Whether we're a senior person or a junior person, whether we're management or individual contributor. So we are these walking intersections.
Yeah, that's funny. When you first said that, I was trying to read your hesitation through a Zoom screen. And now that you're here in person, it's so much better than a Zoom screen. But I was trying to read your hesitation. And in my mind, I thought, okay, there's a bunch of competing ologies here.
Absolutely.
And that's, again, seeming versus being.
So I think we as humans, we tend to focus on one of those personality characteristics and traits, and sometimes to the detriment of others. And so that's that balance. How do we see ourselves, first of all?
Right.
Do we see ourselves as predominantly one personality characteristic, or do we see ourselves holistically? And that's part of maturity, right? As we go through what Bobby Harrow calls the cycle of socialization, where we, as infants, don't really know who we are. And then we start learning from our parents who we are. So our parents and our families select which personality characteristic we kind of focus on.
Yes, to elevate versus...
Right. So, and I had a really interesting situation where I was in a workshop with a class, and there was a mixed race gentleman who said that his parents always taught him about being mixed race and that he had this black side to him that he needed to watch out for. And I thought that was really interesting because his parents lifted that up. I didn't lift that up with my kids who are biracial. So our parents and our families do play a big role in where we as individuals put our focus on which personality characteristic we have.
So back to that moment, because I want to follow that a little bit, because that seems to have been an intentional choice.
Yes.
Okay. Can you walk me through there, the things that you were wrestling with as a caregiver and how you, by that choice, would be creating what you thought is a nurturing environment?
Right. So the thought process was, and with children, you always want to create this space for them where they're free to make their own choices and grow as they will grow rather than trying to foist your own opinions on them. So our thinking was, well, we want to protect our kids from this horrible racism that exists for as long as we can.
Right.
Give them the opportunity to grow and not be negative about themselves or about the world in which they're going to interact and the people with which they're going to interact. And we thought, well, there's going to come a time when we have to really talk about it, but not as they're really young. So that was a conscious decision to not talk about it until they were older and we thought could handle the differences and the discussion.
Did you feel then, like in their brain development, as they were kind of processing this world, that if you were to throw up those barriers or that kind of those limitations that could box them in, that they would actually exhibit some of the symptoms of being boxed in and not grow beyond?
Yes. And of course, each child is different. So one child might have that set of blinders put on them and accept those and go through the world with them. And another one might not. And it is up to us as parents to know our children enough to know, so when is the right time? And another factor in that, though, is we ourselves are challenged in knowing how to deal with it. So we may even want to speak that about it with our children, but we don't know how.
Right. We might not have the language or, and I have to say this, there's so many times that I'm entering a conversation with my child about so many things that I'm recognizing I don't have the emotional maturity in this moment.
Yes. And so that makes us say, oh, I need to learn this first before I can have this conversation. And hopefully you don't take too long to learn about it. And some of us are perfectionists too. So we think, well, I have to have all the answers before I can have this discussion. Well, you give yourself some grace.
So when did then you make the choice to have that discussion, and how did you know it was time?
We made the choice. I made the choice to have the discussion. Actually, my wife made the choice before I did. And we did it earlier with our son than we did with our daughter. And it was just because of his personality and his makeup. We decided a little bit earlier to do that. And we thought, you're old enough to be interacting with people who are probably going to have this perception of who you are and your color. So we want you to at least have the tools to be able to react to that or be careful not to react to that.
So how did you even, and I know your kids are older now,
right,
but how do you lay a conversation like that out in a way that, again, is not limiting, even though you know that what you're doing is getting tools to hopefully break through those limits?
Right. The way that I think it's best to approach it, and we approach it as, let's have a conversation about how people interact with other people. And so that interaction, and there are different kinds of interactions that you have to talk about. And just the notion and how you say this to a child is so critically important, that you're not going to be liked by everyone just because of the color of your skin. You just have to say that. It's not that you're placing a judgment on anybody else. You're just stating kind of the facts, just the facts, ma'am, as Joe Fide would say, right?
And when you said that, what did you see?
In Andrew, our son, who's now 30, it was a recognition. I think he'd seen some of it before. Our daughter, I think she denied it for a long time.
Do they have kids?
They don't have kids yet.
So I keep thinking about this because as we're talking about this topic, there's so much there. And then I think about our roles as caregivers, almost as if we were these islands of conversation, but we're not. We exist in communities, right? And we exist in these spaces. And when we talk about community, sometimes it's like, you got to build your own community. Is there a way for us to look at the way community builds towards us as individuals and family members?
So, and there are so many organizations out there that are for parents. So the challenge is knowing where they are in our busy lives and days. Do we have the time to seek out those organizations that already exist?
Right. If you were to kind of take that idea and raise it up maybe another 1,000 feet or so, and when we look down at, say, the systems, if we're building communities, are there ways to approach, say, the building of systems to be more conscientious of the fact that those systems then can be structured to better embrace families?
Well, we could do a whole show on that.
Say next part 2.
Part 2 on that. This makes me think of who's in charge of the system.
Right.
And hopefully the person who's in charge of the system has a collaborative management style or leadership style rather than a command and control leadership style. And starting with that, then it's inviting input from the people who are part of that community to help build the system.
Right.
If you have the leisure of starting from scratch.
Yeah, good luck.
Because so many of our systems already in existence.
Right.
And so there's this notion of the community leadership has a responsibility, but individuals have a responsibility as well. We can't just wait for people to come to us. We have to be ready and we have to allocate time to seek what's out there, seek what's in the community.
If I'm not mistaken, you had told me that you're originally from South Carolina?
Charleston.
Now, how did you go, and I'm not sure if you had kids then or not, but how did you go about building community then in an existing system that was new to you?
So when I came to New Hampshire, I came to Dartmouth College. So was not yet an adult.
Yeah.
Didn't have to go through that building of the community because the community was Dartmouth College. There are so many people, though, who do come like it sounds like you did as an adult and have to figure out how to build that community. And that's really difficult because you are trying to find your way in this culture, this society, as well as trying to find who can I talk to? Mm-hmm. I have to have a job. I have to pay the bills. How am I going to focus on that? And is that going to take up all of my time? And I don't have time for community. So it takes a very disciplined person to deal with that.
Yeah, and you have to then prepare those people or the children that come along with you eventually on how to do that too with agency and clear-eyedness.
This is the book on parenting that we all wish we had.
It is.
I think it starts with the notion of humility, recognizing that I may not have all the answers, and it's okay that I don't have all the answers. I need to try anyway, and I need to try in a way that, and we hear the phrase, treat your kids like adults, because they really do know more than we think they know. So treat them as if, one of my colleagues, Deacon Reverend Derek Scalia, says this all the time. He apologizes to his kids that he's not necessarily going to get this right, but he's going to give it his best effort. So he's giving himself the grace, and he's asking his children to give him the grace that I'm doing the best I can with what I know right now.
Yeah. Now you said that, you don't have all the answers, but it does feel like you have some of the answers.
Have some experience, some experience.
So going back to that idea of community as it exists. Okay. So if you could wave your magic wand and begin a community in a way that would better engage those people that are within it, where would you begin?
I would probably begin with a meeting. Mm-hmm. A meeting where we hear what everyone values. Because I find in the work that I do that it's differences in values that trip us up. So we all have to share what our values are as individuals and then come to some agreement as to what are our values as a community? What do we all agree we want to value as a community? We can still have different individual values, but what are we valuing as a community? And then, so what are the needs based on those values? What structures do we need to put in place? And then who's going to help lead this thing to make sure that we're living into those values?
If you're on the ballot, I've got to vote. But I keep thinking about two things, one of which was Wendy Ellis's Building Community Resilience model, where she talks about shared understanding, which includes a shared narrative. But then I keep thinking about Robin Higa, who was one of the founders of the Community Cafe model. And she talked about that glue that brings society together better than anything else was aspiration. If we aspire together,
Yes.
we will stay together.
Well, and that what we see in how discrimination interpersonal level is addressed is through shared effort, shared experience and shared effort. We think back to when the Irish were first immigrating, there was this, Irish Catholics and non-Catholics never mix. And suddenly they got thrown into communities together and they built communities together. And now Catholics and non-Catholics marry all the time, right? We don't even think about there was this contention at the beginning. So it's that shared set of goals, shared action. That's how we can break down some of these barriers that we have and divisions we have between us. Mm-hmm. Communities need to have community conversations.
Yeah. James McKim, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Well, great. Thanks for having me. Great conversation.
This podcast was brought to you by Nixon Peabody, who delivers exceptional legal services for clients in the community by combining high performance, an entrepreneurial spirit, deep engagement, and an unwavering commitment to a culture of collaboration, diversity, and humanity. Nixon Peabody works with universities, hospitals, and nonprofits of every size to maximize impact. For more information, visit nixonpeabody.com. Many thanks to the Samuel P. Hunt Foundation for sponsoring this podcast. Established in 1951, Samuel P. Hunt Foundation is a Manchester-based, independent nonprofit that provides grants primarily for the arts, children and youth services, faith-based organizations, educational institutions, healthcare, and human services. New Hampshire Family Now is listed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more. Listen wherever you get your podcasts or ask your smart speaker to play New Hampshire Family Now.